being brought to you by Voices in the Dark Repertory Theater and the Center for African and African American Studies here at Southern University in New Orleans. We're going to first call upon the Assistant Director of the Center and the Artistic Director of the Multipurpose Auditorium, Ms. Tommy Myrick, to come and bring greetings to us on today.
Good morning. Hello, you're out there. Okay, good morning. On behalf of Southern University and on behalf of the Center for African and African American Studies and of course Voices in the Dark, we are all too pleased to have you here today on this very special occasion. Over the years, for the past 3 years, Voices in the Dark, along with the Center for African and African American Studies, has been responsible for trying to showcase the works of African American female artists. We have found that over the years that the legacy of our history, though it is not necessarily always seen in the history books, that African American people on a whole have indeed left their legacy and have left their history through our arts. And that's why it's so very, very, very important to study the arts, particularly here in America, to study the artistry of African Americans, because whereby we are not
we are just excited about who we have brought in today to present to you, but I need you to understand we're just as excited about who we have here among us. We're excited that Mrs. Florence E. Borders is the archivist for the Center for African and African American Studies here at Southern University of New Orleans, and she will bring words concerning the occasion.
Thank you. It gives me extremely great pleasure to be the person to talk about the significance of the occasion today. When we first started the African American Women's Art Symposium in 1994, we were aware that we had finally come to a point when we had a large number of women in the various arts who could participate. And they responded to the invitation of Ms. Myrick wholeheartedly. It was very heartwarming to see the communications and the correspondence that were generated by people who had interest in coming to participate in this great event. As I read the note in Homecoming that Stella Jones Gallery put out when they brought SAMELLA here, and the mention that in 40 years, the picture of women in the various arts, of African American women in the various arts, has changed so that we are represented in areas that once there would have been no role models for. I know that when SAMELLA and I were students at Tamala Farm School, she had no role model in the visual arts to set her course by. I guess maybe we knew about Symella Lewis and a few other women who were included in Calverton's anthology and so forth. And the person who taught us art in school at the farm was a regular classroom teacher who was teaching us what they call public school art. But SAMELLA had her vision set elsewhere and went on beyond that, and then was able to inspire other young women and men to reach for higher goals. So that this occasion calls to mind for me and perhaps for you the distance we have come, and sets for us the challenge of the distance we have yet to go. In our past 3 symposia, we had literary and performing artists as our headliners. And for this 4th annual African American Women's Art Symposium, we have a visual artist who has, as the people say, paid her dues. She has been there and she has done that. And we feel especially privileged that you included in your schedule the time to come here and to hear her presentation. We thank you for this, and we are sure that this is one of the occasions that will go down in the annals of the Center's archives as a highlight for all of us at SUNO. Thank you for your presence.
Dr. SAMELLA Lewis is an art historian, artist, author, editor, art curator, educator, and filmmaker. A native of New Orleans, Dr. Lewis received her education in the public schools of this city and graduated from McDonogh No. 35 High School. She then studied at Dillard University for 2 years under a Delta Sigma Theta scholarship, and later transferred to Hampton Institute, now Hampton University, where she received a Bachelor BS in Art. Graduate degrees were earned at Ohio State University, and she engaged in further study at numerous universities, including Harvard, First Institute of Chinese Civilization, Shanghai University. Teaching experiences have included such universities as Hampton, Morgan State, Florida A&M, where she developed and chaired the art department, the University of the State of New York at Plattsburgh, and Scripps College in California. She also has lectured widely and traveled extensively to study the art of diasporan communities. Publications by Dr. Lewis include Black Artists on Art, African American Art for Young People, and the Art of Elizabeth Catlett, one with whom she had enjoyed a close association at Dillard University. She is the founding editor of the International Review of African American Art, formerly known as Black Art, an international quarterly. And she was the founder of Contemporary Crafts Gallery. Films by Dr. Lewis have included The Black Artist and several documentaries on male artists, including John Outerbridge, Bernie Casey, Richmond Barthé, and Charles Hutchinson, a decoy carver. We could go on and on about Dr. Lewis. We are genuinely excited about her being here, but we wish not to take not another moment from her and her stunning and stellar presentation. I don't mind telling you that I am enjoying myself immensely as I gush over this bona fide, stellar individual in the constellation of not just African American heroes and heroines, but of humanity. I present you none other than Dr. SAMELLA Lewis.
Are you going down? I should go home after that. Because thank you, Reverend Webster, and certainly my old classmate, Mrs. Borders, and Miss Merrick. I'm really happy to be here and to see many old friends and to revisit the city that I've missed all these years. But I've had to go to those other places to work on projects and to straighten a few people out and to let them know that that we are feisty here in New Orleans. Okay, I know I'm supposed to be giving a slide lecture, but I have a few things to say before we move to the slides. And I want you to know that I was an artist, a visual artist, I still am, but I had to, out of self-defense, become an art historian and a curator and a filmmaker and all of those things because I didn't see anybody else doing it. And I didn't see our young people being encouraged to be the critics, the art historians, and to work in analyzing and really trying to pass on information to other people about the importance of the visual arts. Well, the visual arts were here before languages. They were here before any other form of expression in that they were part of preservation, of people trying to preserve themselves, to get food, to survive. And they were tied to the religion, the whole thing of wanting to survive, so they would honor the gods. They would honor that which was unseen with that which is seen so that their presence could be felt and that there could be some rewards. So the visual arts, I'm not talking about the Western art, which has architecture as the mother of the arts, but I'm talking about the visual arts in terms of the cave paintings, in terms of those objects and implements that were used to inspire and to make known the rituals and how much people really needed the resources of unseen forces. Also, the visual arts are, in terms of African American artists, are a very important part of our history. We can understand the arts better than we can understand the languages because many of us cannot interpret the one language to another language because sometimes we only know one language. Also, the written word depends on sometimes other people's opinions. And the interpretation of the visual arts is frequently an individual type thing, also a cultural and a group type situation. Now, this whole thing of art, many times we wonder, well, what in the world is art? They want you to define it. Well, we have since learned that art is defined by the culture. It is not something that is absolutely universal, as we were taught some time ago. It is something that is needed by, utilized by, and historically documents to a large extent the culture that different peoples of the world have to function in terms of their society. So if you go to Africa, there's no such word as art. Art is so intertwined, this is traditional Africa, so intertwined in the everyday affairs and the lives of the people in the communities. You go to Asia, there is no such word as art per se, because it has a different function. But when you come to the Western world, art has numerous meanings depending on where you are, depending on your class, and depending on the history that you conform to. Unfortunately, in the United States, and I worked at the Getty last year, and we have a saying that Getty has more money than God, but the Getty has so much money that the art, in many respects, is guided by, or the people who collect the art are guided by how much they pay for it. It is not necessarily one in terms of enrichment of the people or the culture. It is not what art is in Africa or was in Africa before the colonization. It is not what art is in Brazil to the Afro-Brazilians. It is not the same thing. So let's be mindful that here in this culture, you have a diversity of cultures, but each group can bring to the whole pie, so to speak, that which to them enriches their lives and results in what we would consider as art. Now, we had this concept of fine arts where for many years the crafts, so-called crafts, were excluded. But that meant we were excluding practically the whole Chinese art. Because Chinese art, the main art forms are still ceramics, metalsmithing, pottery. It's not painting. It's not oil painting as you would find in Europe. It's not gesso painting. It's not any of those things. It is what we traditionally call ceramics. And a lot of the Japanese art is that way also. But we have things to be thankful for. In the visual arts, there are two changes occurring. And in our time, the future art historians, and this we have to deal with, future art historians must recognize there's an increase in the number of professional women artists. Now, in the Native American culture, women are the artists. Men only create certain of the art forms, but generally speaking, women are the artists. In many African cultures, women are the artists. And we have to understand that even though many of us still remain unrecognized, we form the basic structure of those art communities. And women make very constructive contributions to the mainstream art of any culture, of any country, of any civilization, and especially of this civilization in the United States, of the African American civilization in the United States. The women from the African American communities make significant contribution to what we consider as the mainstream art culture. Now, I don't want to go into the whole of art history and examine the mainstream art culture and what it is, because I'm sure we would be here for quite a long time. But many of the art historians who are in universities and many of the museum directors and curators and many of the connoisseurs will not agree that African American women artists have made significant contributions to the culture of the United States. And that is because they are caught up frequently with a myopic perspective and a limited view of what art is about. And art is about changing of styles, maintaining the European concept, but doing something that is absolutely different and not adhering to the prevailing thinking or thoughts of the time. But in other words, creating completely new forms and new ideas. In the African American women's art forms, you will find some prevailing of historical knowledge, of documents that will help enrich our culture, but at the same time, utilizing and mixing things so that they look as though they are new, but it's new ways of seeing them. And so we have creativity growing out of, we'll say, making do with the old, and at the same time creating ideas and forms that appear to be new, but are just presented in a different way. It's the same way as cooking. I know New Orleans is a great place for foods. The great cooks do not measure and say, I'm going to have a half cup of this and a half cup of that. They know the ingredients and they know the amounts that will result in a tasteful dish. The same thing happens in the visual arts. We take from the old society, we take from the generations prior to our generation, and we learn some of the effective things that will make for an exciting experience, and also for documenting what is a meaningful experience to our culture. Many times we are stymied by the whole question of quality. People say that, well, we can't include you not because you're a woman artist, but because you do not produce art of quality. Now this whole situation, I know we've heard it over and over again. We hear from museum people. They want art of quality. Well, what is quality? It depends on, to me, quality depends upon a successful putting together a wide range of opposites. Bringing in the old, bringing in the new. One might say that the work of art is a fusion of polarities, and that the artist might be described as a hybrid. I know when I lived in Louisiana, and my mother is from the Bayou Teche region. So it was very interesting because most people didn't see art as art, but they saw it in a more functional manner. And so those people who were called artists or decided they wanted to be artists were the people who were considered as the weak people because they couldn't do the heavy work. And so mentally, they were not equipped to function as artists. But we know that these are the people of influence, and that they, in spite of people considering them as being the weak people, they were the people who influenced others through their color, their forms, their shapes, their designs, their diagrams. In fact, Elizabeth Catlett was given the opportunity to either leave the country or to be arrested because the government thought her work was dangerous. And all she did was mother and children and very peaceful kinds of things. She didn't really begin to do the political art until she went to Mexico. So, but she was given the opportunity to leave rather than be arrested. But when she went to Mexico, they arrested her. The government had her arrested for political acts in Mexico, when that was not true. But what I want to do today is to go through some of the slides, and as I move through the slides, and I know I have to stop in 25 minutes, I want to talk about some of the people and give you some of the history. And I also want you to know that I wrote a 5-page paper of which I have completely ignored. Okay, I want to begin with the first slide. I'm pushing something here where it should be, it's too low. But anyway, this is the beginning. This is in terms of African American women art. I don't know if you know about the great quilter Harriet Powers, who was born a slave, and she lived in Georgia, and she did what we call the Bible quilts. This is not one of her pieces, but I want you to know that quilts reflect an early form, quilts are an early form of not only African American art, but African art. And in Africa, they were appliqué, and the most famous of the African quilts were made in what is now called the Republic of Benin, and formerly Dahomey. And they were called the King's Appliqué. Now, in the United States, these quilts were put together frequently by African American women. And they were not just thrown together as some of the European quilts were measured and were considered in terms of design, where you have a diamond shape, you have this, you have that, but they became monotonous. But in the African American quilts, the African American women used leftover fabrics and fabrics that had been used, and put together those designs and those shapes in what now is considered as a very abstract manner. And they were thoughtful, and they were provocative, and now we study them and we understand that these are not just quilts, but these are forms of art and design, and even though they're not painted, they're not just crafts, they are works of art. And they're exhibited around the country now, and unfortunately, fortunately, some of the women are making money on them, but unfortunately, they're not usually the women who make the quilts. One of the most important periods of African American women art can be found in what we call the folk tradition. And this is a Louisiana artist, Clementine Hunter, who is one of the most important folk artists. I think she was about 100 years old when she died. She and U.B. Blake died during the same year. And Clementine Hunter lived in Natchitoches and on the plantation there all of her life. But she is regarded as, her works are regarded as some of the most important of the folk art. Clementine Hunter was not included in a major exhibition of works that was circulated by the Corcoran Gallery, and that really excited the art world, the contemporary art world, because she was very cautious about who showed her work and where her work went, and because she was not as cooperative and was not as eager to have her work included in many things, people thought she was very mean and said, well, we're just going to exclude you. And this is a part of the problem in terms of the establishment. If you do not agree as an African American artist or woman artist with what their beliefs are and what their measure of quality is, then you're not included. So this is why I always say that we have to be grateful that we have Stella Jones galleries in our museums, because until the time comes when that measure is one of cooperation and better understanding, then only a few will be chosen, and those few frequently will be supported if they are indeed following the guidelines of what we call strictly the Western tradition. So Clementine Hunter was not a cooperative one. She followed her own guidelines, and she is extremely important in terms of the women's art movement, and especially the African American women. Ruth Waddy is not a great artist, but Ruth Waddy is an important person in the field of African American art and African American women artists. Ruth Waddy is responsible for the careers of a good number, at least 10 African American artists who moved from the West Coast to New York. And Ruth is in her 90s now. And she founded what she called, it was an art association in West Coast and Southern California. And she really beat on the doors of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art to integrate and to show the works of African American artists. Ruth Waddy had a promise from the directors of the museum there that if she could find them a tanner, that they would show a few works by African American artists. Ruth Waddy was smarter than the director, and she found a tanner for him. It was called Daniel and the Lion's Den, and she found it in the basement of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. So that's where, if and when we are collected, that's frequently where we end up. So if you want to really see a rich resource in African American art, you have to go to the basement. But Ruth Waddy is an extraordinary woman, and she also she participated in the Watts art exhibits and organizing the exhibits in Watts. And she, even though she's in her 90s, she still believes that the key to the whole situation is revolution. But that's Ruth's opinion. She was born in Kansas, and I guess she's been involved in revolutions all her life, and she's just a wonderful person. This is one of her forms also. Ruth suffers from epilepsy. She used to, at least. I think she's much better now. But she was working for the county, and the county wouldn't allow her to work and have epilepsy, and they put her on welfare. She didn't want to be on welfare, so she thought she would pull a trick, so to speak, on the county, and she moved to Tobago. And she insisted that they should send her welfare check to Tobago. And she thought maybe they would give her a job back and bring her home rather than do that, but they didn't. They sent her welfare check to Tobago. I think they were glad to get Ruth out of Los Angeles. But now, speaking of quilts, one of the persons who followed in the quilt tradition, now this is not a quilt because I want you to see, you probably know her work through quilt, and I want you to see that how she started, and that you do have that kind of applique and flat work that she ended up doing, and that's Faith Ringo. Now, Faith Ringo is one of the most important of the African American women artists. Not only that, but she is an organizer. She, with the College Art Association, she started the whole... Oh, thank you. Frank Ringo really pushed the College Art Association of America, which probably has met in New Orleans, but which is the largest art association in the world. She pushed them to include, not just include, but document the histories and the culture of African American artists, and especially women artists. She also pushed them to set up a special grant so that African American women artists could become art historians and could study in studio art, get higher degrees in studio art. So any of you who are interested, the College Art Association each year awards grants to African American women artists who want to further their education. And when they end up with their PhDs, which they help them to achieve, they find jobs for them and have the university pay half the salary and the College Art Association pays the other half. So it's something that Faith Ringo has been fighting for and working for, and she is quite one of the most important achievers in terms of African American women artists. Now, this is one of her pieces of the 60s, and it's called Die. It's a large piece, and it has to do with friction and controversy and problems. So Faith, and this is one of her works. You can see where she moves in that flat and that direction, applique kind of direction. But this is a painting, and this is about people at a party. It's not a three-dimensional, but it's a sort of a two-dimensional kind of piece. It's on canvas, and this one is also the mother and child image. But you can see where Faith, her style is very different from many of the styles that you see in terms of art in general. She's also written, published children's books, and she, in order to get where she is, she didn't just work as an artist, she had to teach for many years, which most of us have to do, and she is now a full professor at the University of California at San Diego, which is located in La Jolla. This is the work of Malkia, who is an artist at Howard University. I guess she's retired by now from Howard University, but she is she's very important in that she focuses on things to do that have to do with Africa. Her name is really, her name is Lucille Roberts, but she calls her adopted name is Malkia. And this is a whole different, so what I'm really trying to show you that we do many styles and many types of media. Of course, Artist Lane, you probably have seen her work at the Stella Jones Gallery, and she focuses on sculpture, but Artist also does a lot of portrait work and a lot of drawings. She's now located in New Mexico. She was in Los Angeles, but she moved after the big earthquake, not the big one, but the last big one. She moved to New Mexico because she didn't want to go back into a studio. We have the work, this is still Artist Lane, and the young man who has the leading role in The Amistad was one of her models before he got that position. I don't know if you ever saw the sculpture, the large sculpture that she has with a man with his leg, one leg against the other, with the one leg coming out in terms of a triangular shape. Well, that is the man who played the lead role in Amistad. The next artist is Phoebe Beasley. You probably also saw her work at the Stella Jones Gallery. She does mostly collage. And this is Phoebe Beasley also with the quilting, the person, grandmother doing quilting. This is a very important artist, Camille Billups, who does ceramics. This is a ceramic piece, very large. She even does ceramic chairs. But Camille travels to Egypt and different places, and she also has great archives. She has the Hatch Billups Studio, or Hatch Billups Archives in New York, and she's been documenting, I guess for the past 20 years or more, artists and musicians, and you can go there and hear tapes by many of the most important jazz musicians and the great directors and dancers and visual artists. So the Hatch Billups Studios is one of the most important areas of places for conserving our art and our culture and the visual and performing arts. I think this is turned the wrong way. This is called the Kaohsiung series. This is when Camille went to Taiwan and spent some time there, I think on a Fulbright fellowship. But she's a very, very important printmaker, ceramicist, and just gives great lectures also. Marie Johnson, who lives in Oakland and who is one of the earlier artists. I guess Marie graduated from Morgan State, and she does painting, and she also does collages and also installations. Vivian Brown, no, this is, not Vivian Brown, this is, well, guess I've forgotten her name now, but anyway. Let me get to Vivian Brown. This is Vivian Brown. Vivian Brown is deceased now, but she was a professor at Rutgers University, and was one of the very important New York artists. Mary Parks Washington is a graduate of Spelman College, and you'll find that most of these people who are active or still active, the majority of them graduated from predominantly black colleges. So when people tell you that you are not going to get what you need at one of the predominantly black colleges, don't believe it, because that's where you get the support, that's where you get the encouragement. And I'm a perfect example of that. I know that this is true. Margot Humphrey should be considered as the best lithographer in this country. You wouldn't know it, but she is, because she's at the University of Maryland, and she's supposed to be mean also because she refuses to be told what to do and how to do it, when to do it. But Margot is an excellent, excellent lithographer. She's done work at Tamarind, which is the most important of the places for lithographer. It's in New Mexico, and you have to be invited to do work there. Margot has been invited time and time again. This is another one of her works. And this looks like a painting, but it's not. It's a lithograph, a color lithograph. And her most famous one is coming up, and it's called The Last Barbecue. And it's a wonderful piece. And they're not available now, but I did have one that I gave away to the Hampton University Museum. Betty Starr. Betty Starr is the mother of a family of artists, girls, female artists. Allison, and she's just, all three of her daughters are artists. And Betty, this I'm sure is because Betty created an environment where you either had to become a part of it, or you felt as though you were just out of it. And Betty would go around to swap meets and old places, old shops, and find castaway things, castaway items. And also she carried on family traditions through boxes, through art forms that was sometimes cigarette boxes, cans, and she would use those to express ideas about her family and to continue the history of her family. And also, Betty learned a lot from the folk artists who made their works based on visions, and they set up altars, and their works were created not as artists, but as words from God, from visions that they had overnight, and visions that they had that were transferred from one period, one sound, one person, one idea to another. And so her boxes, her altars, her installations have all made changes, not just in the arts of African American women, but also in the art of women and individuals in the United States. She is included in many museums, but she also is dedicated to the concept of making room and opening doors for African American women and African American individuals. You can see her focus also on Africa, and this is an installation that she did in Asia using leaves and castaway things, and that's her shadow that has been silhouetted on that form. This is the work of Lois Jones, who's in her 90s, and she's called the Great Dame of African American art. And she's one of the most important of the African American women artists. Lois lives in Washington, D.C., and she is still functioning, not as well as she used to, but her works are very important works that are collected by many museums, and she still gets around and tries to go to places like Africa and South America, and she has a house in Haiti. She's especially interested in the diasporan culture. You can see the impact of Africa on Lois's work. This is from a Haitian series. This certainly you recognize as a Haitian marketplace. Now, I wanted to show you this in this sequence. You notice I haven't gone by years and dates and things of that sort. But Elizabeth Catlett was a student of Lois Jones at Howard University. And Lois taught her design. And so I want to talk about, this thing of passing on, of helping each other, working together. And that's why I'm glad to see that the show downstairs was organized in a collective manner so that people have come together to install what probably is not the largest show of African American women artists, but it's an important step. It's an important beginning. And I hope that out of that will come this whole thing of cooperating with each other and being mindful that you can do more in a collective manner than you can in an individual way. Now, Lois Jones remembers and encouraged Elizabeth Catlett. Elizabeth, at times, I didn't have the best feelings, but when your teacher gives you a C sometimes, you don't quite appreciate that. But sometimes they give you a C to encourage you, to tell you you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that in itself is an encouragement and will stimulate you and can generate more action. I know when I was at 35, Mr. Spriggins, who was our drafting teacher, told the class that boys could do better work than girls. And you know what that did to me. I not only finished my work in drafting in about 20 minutes, but I went on to draw and to make things and to create other things. But he did that not because he believed it, but he did it because he wanted to inspire us the girls to not be shy and come on out there and do your work. This is a lithograph by Elizabeth Catlett. You can see the impact of design on her work, even though people say, well, it has a quality that you can trace to the Mexican creative forms. It also has that which Lois Jones, I'm sure, instilled in her design process. Also, this is a sculpture by Elizabeth Catlett. This is a print. Now I have to move on. Another sculpture using the planes and the design concept, and a multiple print where she moved. It's a lino cut using a small. It's a big print, but it's made out of small particles of linoleum, where the image is repeated, inked again and repeated. Now what I'm going to do is to show you a little bit of my work, to show you this is what I did at Dillard University under Elizabeth. So we have 3 generations of African American women artists. You have Lois Jones, Elizabeth Catlett, and myself. This was done under Elizabeth Catlett at Dillard University. This was done when Elizabeth Catlett encouraged me to transfer to Hampton sculpture. I'm going to quickly go to Hampton. So what I'm saying to you is that these colleges that are predominantly African American can be great resources. This is Bayou area, and this is also a statement about colonial situation. This is a piece that the Obia woman, which I deal with in terms of not only the Bayou country, but Brazil, Africa, and so forth. I'm going to rush through. I'm running late. Maybe we can have the lights and a few questions. Any questions? Questions? No questions. guess that's it, huh? No questions? It's 1:05, and I understand some of the people here have classes.
12.
Oh, I'm sorry, 12. Is it 12 o'clock class?